Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn. Through the storm, through the night.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Love Them Both. This is a talk show, documentary show on the moral and spiritual problems of our society and our world. This is going to be part two of the show we started last time on the disrespect for human life shown by police when they kill undeserving people, and in particular, when they don't give them the chance to, the police don't take a risk and give a chance to show the person a chance to show the suspect a chance to show his true intention. By that I mean we'll have police who have shot people because they thought someone had a gun in their pocket, weren't even reaching for, or they didn't know. We've shot people, seen police shoot people who had a gun in their pocket but weren't aiming at anybody, had no intention to shoot, had demonstrated no intention to harm anybody, but they were shot again. We've seen police shoot people who had a gun and had their hand on it, but weren't aiming it at anybody. It may have been a legal gun. That happened in Chicago not too long ago. So this is part two of the shooting of Philando Castile, innocent man in Minnesota. In part one, we went through it. We're going to see some clips in this show, some reviewing it, and the tragic heartbreak to his girl, Diamond Reynolds, his fiancee, her 4-year-old daughter, and all of that. They had the trial. Clear thinking, we show these were innocent people. In these clips, you can sort of see, you will see that these were innocent people. But that's not what the jury found. First of all, the first obstacle in getting justice in these cases is getting the prosecutor to prosecute. And many times the prosecutions are biased toward the police. We're seeing that concern here in Pittsburgh in the Antoine, what's his name, case, trying to get the police, the district attorney, make sure he prosecutes. The first obstacle is to make sure the officer gets prosecuted. Then the second obstacle is the court and system. But let me mention, in this case, Philando Castile, as you'll see in these clips, you can tell these are innocent people, and it was clear thinking that led to the prosecution in Minnesota. At 35 years old, no criminal record, Castile worked his way up to a cafeteria supervisor, I believe it was, in St. Paul Magnet School. The governor questioned the shooting. A prosecutor assailed the officer. The governor said he would do everything he can for justice to be done, and the officer was charged with manslaughter. In November of 2016, the Ramsey County District Attorney announced that he charged Yanez with 1 count of second-degree manslaughter. They didn't charge him with murder because he was doing this under the heat of his emotions. But even if something is an accident, a person should be punished for manslaughter, can be punished for manslaughter. And this was intentional on his part. He was out of control. And 2 counts, he was charged with 2 counts of dangerous discharge of a firearm because he endangered Diamond Reynolds, Miss Reynolds, and her 4-year-old daughter, who are also in the car. The officer's testimony said he told investigators the first thing he noticed when approaching the car was the smell of burning marijuana, according to transcripts of the interview. The police dash cam showed how quickly the encounter escalated, how fast it shifted when Castile told the officer he had a gun he was legally carrying. But remember, before the officer even pulled over the car, he thought it looked like a car, the person that was involved in an armed robbery several days before. So his jumping to conclusion already, you might say, probably was setting his mind up with fear, with caution, with making him nervous about this state. He thought he could be stopping an armed robbery, possibly. The officer Yanez said later that he feared for his life, and he feared for the lives of his partner as well as the other two passengers, Castile's girlfriend and young daughter. The following day, Yanez said, "I thought I was going to die. I was scared because I didn't know what he was going to do, didn't know what Castile was going to do after he announced that he had a legal firearm on him, which was never visible." So he opened fire, and the rest was history. In the dash cam video, moments after he was mortally wounded, Castile can be heard saying that he wasn't reaching for it. He was reaching, he meant that was the last time he was heard speaking. Now, how did this acquittal come by when there's so much clear and moral thinking that these were innocent people, not deserving to be shot to death? There's a thing called the court's instruction on the law. If you're ever going to be on a jury, you should know about this. It was testified Yanez, the officer, was a moral student, and he was acquitted on all charges in June 16th of 2017, acquitting him of manslaughter and 2 counts of endangering Reynolds and her 4-year-old daughter. The same day, St. Anthony officials says Yanez, the officer, would not return to their police force. The jury decided that the state, well, why did the jury acquit him? The jury decided that the state had not met its burden for conviction under the court's instruction of the law. Now, that's a significant statement. If you're ever on a jury, you've heard that. If you're going to be on a jury, you should know how to handle it. A jury member told the press later that according to the wording of the law regarding the phrase culpable negligent in the law for manslaughter, I guess, he says this was the main factor along with many others leading to the verdict. They couldn't fit this they couldn't fit what the evidence they saw to fit to that wording of the law. Now, another juror told in a video interview what happened in the jury room. He said they started deliberating on a Monday, and they were having a hard time. So by Thursday or so, they decided to get a wording of the law in common lay language, because there were 2 jurors holding out against acquittal, and it's a tragedy, but they didn't stick to their guns. And by Friday, they persuaded them that they had to go according to the wording of the law and cave into their conscience. Now, that's bad because, I'll jump to here, juries have the power to judge the law. The court, let me see if I can find it here. Instructions they were given. The court inevitably, the judge will tell you, you must follow the instructions of the law, and you as a juror can only judge the facts of the law. You can't decide whether the law was good or bad. But this is not true. But we as citizens have to know this and stick to our guns if we're on a jury. They will ask you in a jury if you agree with the court's instruction of the law, and you can say yes, providing you have the understanding that in your mind that if the court's instruction on the law leads to a verdict that your conscience doesn't agree with, you don't have to, you can vote your conscience. That's what our Constitution says and our tradition says. Juries have the power to bring in a verdict in both teeth in both law and facts. This is the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice.However, Holmes, District in Horning versus District of Columbia in District of Columbia. Jurors are more powerful than any government officials. Now let me say again, I think I said it at the end of the part 1. The founders gave us 3 boxes. The citizens' power, if they use it, to check government authorities. to get out of control. One is the voting box, the ballot box. The other is the ammo box, the Second Amendment right to defend ourselves against our government if we had to. The third is the jury box. Juries are more powerful than any government official. If you think the law is wrong, this is I'm quoting an article by Paul D. Pierre in Life Advocate in April of 1994. If they think the law is wrong or being wrongly applied, they can find the accused person not guilty, even if all the laws and facts show the person to be guilty, according to the law. The federal court said in U.S. versus Doherty, this power is unreviewable. The juror's vote is unreviewable and unreversible. In other words, jurors cannot be punished for bringing in the wrong verdict. This power is called jury nullification. In most states, if even one juror refuses to convict, it hangs the jury and a mistrial results. This is where you get mistrials from. When one or two jurors won't go along with the verdict. All right, this is lawful. This is right, standing up for his conscience. This power was bought at a great price by English jurors who saved young William Penn from a life of imprisonment in England by finding him not guilty for preaching the gospel without a license in England, where the English law made that illegal. The judge threatened the jurors. Now here's the thing. When the jurors did this, the judge threatened the jurors. The judges don't like this power, jurors to use their independence. The judge in England threatened the jurors, but they stood by their rights under the Magna Carta. These jurors were jailed until the judge's order was overturned on appeal. William Penn went on to found Pennsylvania, and the power of jury nullification was permanently established in both English and American law. So we have to know this and have courage to use it justly when a verdict is not it violates our conscience, violates moral truth. Juries later used this power to free those in the United States violating the Fugitive Slave Act before the Civil War by helping slaves escape. The Fugitive Slave Act was forced through Congress by the South to make it illegal to help slaves escape. Well, people believed that law was wrong and would do it. And when they'd get arrested, it could be the juries wouldn't acquit people for helping the slaves because they believed the fugitive slave law was wrong, that slavery was wrong, okay? So this has been used before. John Jay, the first Justice of the U.S. Supreme, said the jury has the right to judge both the law as well as the facts in controversy. And what this means is the way you can handle this in practical terms, if you're on the jury, they'll have a question, do you agree with the court's instruction of the law? You can't say yes. But if in the proceedings it turns out that the court's instruction law is leading to a conviction that violates your conscience, that you know is morally wrong, that you know is not morally right, that is unconstitutional, or whatever, morally wrong, you can stand your ground. You know that you have to stand your ground and not go along with it. You can hang the jury, and you should. The jury has the right to, they call this, when a jury votes against a bad law, a verdict from a bad law, they call this judging the law as well as the facts of the case. It basically means you don't have to vote against your conscience or moral truth, God's law. The jury, said Samuel Chase, signer of the Declaration of Independence and later U.S. Supreme Court Justice, has the right to judge both the law and the facts. They have a right to vote for moral truth. Now, prosecutors have always tried, and the courts have always tried to circumvent the power of the jury, as they did in England with the jurors of William Penn. So we are in Pennsylvania here on a place of a great tradition in Pennsylvania. So a juror, though the judge may tell him these things are not so, that he must follow the course and instruction of the law, that this will give it, they'll even argue with you that this will give the defendant a fair trial. And some aspects of their instruction may give the defendant a fair trial, but not all. the juror has no legal obligation to listen to the judge if a guilty verdict would violate the juror's conscience. He doesn't even have to explain his verdict. In the past, they opposed it by jailing jurors. Today, it is by planting a compliant juror in the jury box. Government employees, for example, may be particularly suppressed. There may be one juror in the case here. There seemed Philando Castile's jury. There seemed to be one juror who was standing out and taking the lead to try and pressure these two holdouts in the jury into convincing them they had to go by the court's instruction on law and acquit this police officer. So they can plant a compliant juror to harass, cajole, or hurry other jurors into a correct verdict. One of the most important reasons for juries, including grand juries, is for ordinary people to act as a safeguard against abusive government. By exercising the power of jury nullification, people can send a message to the government that their laws or their particular use of these laws is wrong. So that's important to know, to remember that, and not be afraid to be a juror, but be courageous. Wanted to say something else here. What else did I want to say in here? I told you about the jury box. And the court's instruction on the law. Okay, it's important though, because there are consequences for unjust verdicts, immoral verdicts. Like this case, there are consequences that they did not give that officer a punishment. Even for manslaughter, a person who takes a life in the heat of his emotions deserves some, even though not a first-degree murder, but it deserves some punishment for taking human life wrongly. So the consequences of unjust verdicts there are going to be more of them. If juries don't start checking the police, then the police are going to not be afraid to continue to do this. Police killings of innocent people will escalate. Escalate less, unless DAs prosecute and juries convict. U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions said in another, not this case, but another case, flagrant, another case of this type, such failures, that is, failure to acquit, failure to convict someone who's clearly clearly guilty of manslaughter, such failure, or even worse, such failures to convict a policeman, such failures of duty not only harm the victims of these crimes, they harm our country by eroding trust in law enforcement and undermine good and honorable and honest, capable officers. In this day of videos everywhere, we see an increase in shootings of police and harm to honorable police officers. Police have a tough job, but the end does not justify the means. Justice is essential. Justice is key to making society safer for both police and the public. Jesus said, when asked what are the weightier matters of the law, he said, justice, mercy, and faith. These you ought to do and not leave the other things undone. You should deal with the deep issues, justice, and there's a place for mercy and faith in the law too. We need strict, so the juries are the first place against this first obstacle to stand against this. Who can do it the easiest and most quickest. Changing the law needs to be done too, because there's excessive leeway given to police in these current deadly force laws. Experts say that while the videos in these cases are disturbing, in other words, while the truth is disturbing, You see the videos, you're seeing some or all of the truth. While the truth is disturbing, police shootings is disturbing, the legal standard, the laws, is still whether the officer's actions were, quote, objectively reasonable, quote, given the situation they were facing, according to Graham and Connor. Now, in this case, where did I see that? When the district attorney decided to prosecute it, he said, he made this statement. If I can find it, I got papers here. Things are there leading to prosecution that we hear. The district attorney who brought prosecution in this case said, I would submit that no reasonable officer, knowing and seeing and hearing what Officer Yanez did at the time, what the officer knew, saw, and heard. He saw Philando, his courtesy, his respect. He saw Diamond Reynolds, his fiancée, and the 4-year-old girl, all respectful, no threatening body language, telling the truth. The prosecutor said no reasonable officer, knowing this, seeing this, and hearing this, would have used deadly force under these circumstances, unquote. He should have had kept a hold of himself and given Philando time to play out what his actions were going to be. If Philando whipped out a gun and pointed at him, there would have still been time to shoot him, but that wasn't going to happen. That was not indicated in this case, anyhow. So there's excessive leeway given officers by this standard. All it has to be is an objectively reasonable do. But you know how that gets watered down. Objectively reasonable is in the eye of the beholder, and prosecutors and judges are partial to the law enforcement. In 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court case of videos may give us, they said videos may give us some insight, I say some of the truth, but it doesn't change the fact, the fundamental standard by which police actions using force are judged, the law, in other words. Said David A. Harris, professor at the University of Pittsburgh, an expert in police issues of this force. The officer is judged by what he or she reasonably perceives, said David McMullen, an attorney for the Pennsylvania State Trooper who represents the officers in these civil cases. It's the perception of the officer at the time. Well, in this case, if you watch the video, this officer was in a panic. He was out of control with pathological fear. That was his perception, and the jury was talked into acquitting him for it. I criticize these authorities who stand on this law too. They should be criticizing this law. They should not be. They're teaching people in these lawsuits that this is the law you can go by, protecting what the officer perceives. But even if it's not right, they're not telling them that. And this is leading to wrong verdicts too. I'm convinced, and then you got the judge in this case who gave them in his instructions, you have to follow the court's instruction of the law. You as the juror, you cannot judge the law. You can only judge the facts of the law. You can't judge the law itself, even if you think it's wrong. Well, that's not true, according to Supreme Court rulings, but they won't tell you that. So we need reforms in deadly force laws to require that officers have to take a risk to play out what the suspect's actions are going to be. As I said, there have been cases where police have beat up or even killed a suspect for reaching to his pocket, thinking he might have a weapon in his pocket, and he didn't. There have been cases where a person was killed because he had a weapon in his pocket, but he never reached for it. He was killed anyway. Well, he was not given the chance to show what his intent would be with that. When the police do this, they exceed their authority and act as judge, jury, and executioner. This is wrong. The law needs to be changed to require officers take a risk to protect the right to life of the suspect by letting the suspect play out his actions, what his actions are actually going to be, whether they're harmful or not. You shouldn't, there is a risk in being a police officer. If you don't want to take a risk, you shouldn't be a police officer. If you're going to serve and protect, you're going to have to take a police officer. Now, I hate to see good policemen shot too. Many of the ones I've heard about lately have been on domestic violence calls, and the police officers were ambushed, not by someone they saw, but someone in the house ambushed them on the way to the house. They never even saw their assailant. That's one point. The officers have to be made to require in the law to take a risk. And this, I'm not in favor of these stand your ground laws for citizens if they do the same thing. If they allow a homeowner to shoot someone just because they fear bodily harm or injury by someone else. They actually have to be required to take a risk and see and cannot shoot. They can stand their ground all right, but they can't shoot till that person is coming at them, definitely with an intent to harm or kill. So these things can backfire when citizens are allowed that same standard in these stand your ground laws. Another thing in deadly force is the requirement that for the use of deadly force, fear is not morally sufficient, is what we're seeing. The officer must take a risk to see if a threat to life will actually be made. Cleveland, there was a 12-year-old boy playing with a toy gun twirling in a park like it was real. Someone called the police and said there was a boy out there with a gun, looks real. This is another thing. You call the police on somebody with reckless police like this, you don't know what harm you may be creating. Police came out. There was this little black boy twirling this revolver. The black looked like a real gun. Policeman got out of his car, never asked a question, shot the boy dead. 12-year-old boy dead. Never asked a question. And here it was a play gun. It's the same thing. Fear of the officer that boy might take that gun, it might be real, and turn and shoot it on him. That's not sufficient. He has to take, it was only a child, he has to take a risk. We want men to be men. So a better test is the clear and present danger test. A clear and present threat has to actually be made before a citizen or officer can use deadly force in self-defense. Some of these, what else can we say here? I've told you that the consequences of an unjust verdict is bad for the country because it invites more police homicides, police acting. More of these will occur. Police will continue to act as the judge, jury, and executioner of citizens, and when they jump to those conclusions without the suspect actually acting, they're going to make mistakes too. Jumping to conclusions leads to a lot of mistakes. One last point in this is these people were minorities. Now, not all victims of this are black, but a disproportionate number are, it seems. And that's what the NFL black players are protesting about. Philando Castile, it was reported, he has no criminal record. He has no criminal record. He was stopped reportedly 18 times driving just because of a black man driving a car, and police suspected him, usually white, for that reason. So prejudice does get involved in these cases. Where does God stand on prejudice, oppressing the minorities in law with deadly force and otherwise? Remember, God is no respecter of persons. He says, you shall not, in Exodus 23:9, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you," talking to the Israelites, "for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt," unquote. This was to the Israelites after they were slaves, a minority made into slaves who became made slaves then in Egypt. After they were let out of Egypt, they knew what it felt like to be a minority and to be slaves, to be persecuted, to be oppressed in that way. This is how you change your heart. Put yourself in the other person's place, even if they're black people to you. Put your heart in their place. Imagine how you would feel if you or your children were in that place. So in the Bible language, King James Bible language, stranger refers to what we would call a minority, either because they are a minority or because they are, for some reason. It could be because they're recent immigrants or whatever. So, therefore, God's law singled out minorities for special protection, along with the widow and the fatherless, because they are the weak and invariably oppressed by the majority. This is just human nature, the majority, to do this. Those of you who want the national anthem played and don't want the NFL players to protest these killings by bending their knee, not disrespectfully to the flag, but in a different way of respect, who don't want that, have a kind of an empty patriotism without much depth to it. Patriotism has to cover all the citizens, and God wants it to include the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger or the minority. He goes on to say in the Bible, "Thou shalt neither vex the stranger," that's a minority, "nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. If you afflict them in any way and cry unto me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hard." If you afflict the widow, the fatherless, and the minority, and they cry to God, he says, "My wrath shall wax hard, and I will kill you with the sword. So beware, and your wives shall be widows, and your children shall be fatherless." Finally, this is so severe, so take this to heart. If you are not actively, have not got an understanding in your heart of the need to include the minority, to sympathize with the plight of the minority, start putting yourself in their place. To underline all this, the final instruction that God gave the final king of Judah in Old Testament Israel before he kicked them out, he said, this was a king who was not interested in God's ways. He wanted to build a palace. If you read the context in Jeremiah, his problem was he was covetous. He wanted to get rid. He wanted all the trappings of being king, but he really didn't care about the responsibilities of authority. And God said to him, "Thus saith the Lord to this final king, execute you judgment and righteousness, and deliver out of the hand of the oppressor, and do no violence to the stranger," and in King James language that means minority, "to the minority, to the fatherless, to the widow, neither shed innocent blood." See, shedding innocent blood goes along with this. When the police kill someone who didn't deserve to be killed, when they make themselves exceed their authority, jump to conclusions, and make themselves judge, jury, and executioner, they will be shedding innocent blood. And God condemns, he requires innocent blood of us. "For if you do this thing, indeed," he says, "then if you take care of the minorities, the widow and the fatherless, and don't shed innocent blood, if you do this thing, then you shall be entered by the gates of the king's house, sitting on the throne of David, riding in chariots and honor. But if you will not hear these words of protecting the minority, the widow and the orphan, like in abortion, as in abortion, if you will not hear these words, I swear by myself, saith the Lord, that this nation," in that case it was Judah, the Old Testament kingdom of Judah, "shall become a generation," unquote. Jeremiah 23, chapter 20, verse 23, verses 3 to 5. And that nation, that was the last king. He was kicked out because he wouldn't do it. So, they should have, the jurors were not required to make this killing, what they saw, clear thinking led you to see that these were innocent people, respectful people, would be morally wrong to kill them. So the officer was morally wrong, even if they couldn't find a way to make that fit the wording of man's law. They still could have voted their conscience. The Supreme Court backs up for it. You just have to have the courage to do it. Hang the jury. That's how juries get hung, because there's someone on the jury who knows his rights, who has some depth of conviction. And we need people like that. The fastest defense against this would be prosecutors who prosecute and juries who convict in these kind of innocent killings of suspects. Finally, there is one other court that if you do not do that, if the juries do not do that, you're going to face the court of public opinion. That's what's happening in these riots that take place. I hope the riots I hope we have learned our lesson about protests, that violence doesn't pay off. It generates bad will too. But there can be riots, there can be protests. They shouldn't be violent. That wins sympathy. Nonviolence wins sympathy. But there's the court of a public opinion is going to judge we see that in Pittsburgh here. We, in the Antoine Rose case, the high school boy who was shot to death running away from policemen. What was I going to say? Even the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh came out and called for, don't shoot these people in the back. He's telling the police officer, public opinion, as the mayor, authority of a great city, telling the law enforcement, don't shoot people running away from you, because there are police officers who will do this. And Mayor Peduto of Pittsburgh, I give him credit for that. I believe the City Council of Pittsburgh in the Anton Rose case, the black boy of color who was shot in the back running away from a policeman. There was no threat to anybody in doing that. They could catch him later. They could have caught him later. That's the thing. I believe the City Council even then passed a resolution calling for a jury trial. Here you have the City Council telling the law enforcement, the prosecutor, what to do. So if the prosecutor won't prosecute, if the juries won't convict, there is, in court, there's still the court of public opinion you're going to have to face. And it's going to get worse and worse now in this case. So with that, I see we're running out of time here. I thank you for watching. This show will be put on, these shows will be put on a link to these shows will be put on our website at lovethemboth.tv.com, which will channel you to YouTube, but I'll put a link on lovethemboth.tv.com. Go there. It'll be on the page of the fourth tab at the top, gambling. I believe it's called, I might change it to police brutality tab, but these will be there. If you want to go back and see part one, it should be there. And so thanks for watching. Still making shows, Lord willing. We'll see you next time.
On dates before all that, yes. Before all that, yes.
You know what caliber?
9mm.
Okay. Is that the only one?
Only one, yes.
Okay.
That he's ever had around me.
You know what kind of gun was the manufacturer?
Nah, I don't know the manufacturer. I just know it's a 9. It's black. I don't touch it. I don't hold it. I don't.
Have you shot it at the range?
No, he shoots his gun and he buys one for me or rent one.
One?
Yeah.
Okay.
He likes to shoot his own stuff.
All right.
But it was not visible. His shirt was covering it. He had a belt on. It wasn't out. It was not visible.
Okay. So
what they say? Because I know you just got the text.
yeah, I don't think, because Phyllis died. I got some bad news. And I'm sorry it happened. he say anything after he was shot?
He didn't say anything. His eyes rolled in the back of his head and he just looked at me.
Okay.
He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say.
I'm really sorry. It's terrible.
This officer got to go home to his family. He took him away from us. What the hell? It's not fair! It's not fair! Please get me out of here.
We can do that.
How would you like to be taken to the hospital? Do you have a...
I don't have any ride. They took my cell phone, my house keys. I don't even know how I'm getting home in the...
We'll get that stuff back to you. Your cell phone, we'll get that back to you.
I want to go to the hospital so I could see him for the last time.
House keys, you said they took those?
They got my purse. They got everything.
Can we call someone right now down there?
I don't have any numbers to call anyone.
Okay, I can maybe send a squad car over to a house and have someone communicate with you, you know. Like have an officer go to a house.
There's no house to go to. I don't have nobody but my boyfriend. I don't have nobody.
Your mom or...
No, my mom lives in a different state. He was all I had.
So you have no family?
No family, but my sister who was at the scene.
Where did she go to?
I don't know. They took my phone. I didn't even get to talk to her.
Okay, so you need your keys to get back into your apartment.
And I need my phone for sure to call people.
Okay. Your sister who was dropped off before the traffic stop?
Yes.
Okay.
She came back. Once I got on Facebook, they found out where I was and came.
So she came back and so she wasn't there.
He killed him. So now what? Where do we go from here? Because there's going to be lawsuits going to be in order. There's discrimination and there's racism. There's a lot of things that's going to play now because of this.
So here's what Mike and I and what our colleagues do is we go and we do interviews and we talk to everyone, and then we have a crime scene team at the scene of this event, and they're going to do a full forensic crime scene.
Well, make sure they don't remove his gun off of him and try to make it seem like something that it wasn't, because I already know how the system is. I already know how they tamper with evidence. I already know how they do. And they took a life. You guys' department, your police...
We don't work for the department.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. The people who are supposed to serve and protect us took an innocent man's life today. 9 days before his birthday.
Yep, that's a fact, and that's sad, and we're sorry about it. And our job is to find out what happened.
I hope that police officer is going to be fired or something's going to happen with no pay. He should not be allowed to be still working if he don't know how to control his feelings, his emotions, and anything that has to do with taking innocent people's lives.
And if that's found to be true, then there'll be some sort of training, punishment, who knows what. But that's after the investigation. And when we're done with the investigation, we give it to the Ramsey County prosecutor, and then they're going to have a grand jury, and they'll figure out what happened. So there's a lot of evidence we have to go through.
But how do you
Guns,
figure...
the bullets, the cameras, where their cameras rolling, your phone has to be analyzed, because we got to pull that video off of your phone. All that evidence together is how we get a full picture, and the interview with you and your daughter.
The video ain't saved. It's just on Facebook.
Oh, it got posted immediately?
Yeah.
And it didn't get the shooting itself? It was right after?
Yeah, it was after.
Okay, but it still will provide something.
Because he told me don't move, so I couldn't pick my phone up in the midst of him doing that, because he would have shot me too, shit.
Okay. All right, well, I got to go find out where your purse is so we can get you your keys, so you can get back to your apartment. Your phone, we're going to have to take it and download. Even though you say it's posted immediately, the phone still is kept in your flash memory.
Well, I have an iPhone. It's not. You know how Facebook goes live?
Oh, yeah.
I went live.
Okay, well, we'll take a look.
So you can just Facebook. You don't have to take my phone because it's not saved into the memory. iPhone don't. Y'all have iPhones. If you go live on Facebook, that live video don't save to your phone. It only is on Facebook. Okay. And then once it gets shared, it's, you know how that goes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to end the tape portion of the statement. Before I do, is there anything else that's important for me to know as an investigator that we haven't talked about or mentioned?
There's nothing important other than he wrongfully killed a man and asked 2 questions at one time. Can I see your hands? Can I see your license and registrations?
As far as you know, there's no previous dealings between Phil and either one of his officers?
No, he never seen that man a day in his life.
The time is now 23:48 hours.
I'm going to find out about your first time where it is.
In my phone.
Check the phone.
And then I'd like to ring that with Deanna. And would you do me a favor? I know this is hard. I know you're in pain. You're the child protection worker, so I worry about kids. There's nothing we can do about what's already happened, but there's things we can do to make it worse. And I just want you to really...
He died on the scene.
Yeah, I think they loaded him in an ambulance and transported him and tried to revive him. But the word I just got was that he was deceased. So, but what I'd like you to consider, and I know this is just a lot going on in your brain, but I'm going to get a hold of you tomorrow, and I want to set up an appointment to have her interviewed as a witness, but more importantly, I want Mom, you, to talk to the medical staff who's dealt with kids that have had trauma before, and they have advice for parents on how not to make it worse. Because we can't undo what's been done. That's not an option, but we can.
But he still gets to go home to his family. He has no worries. He gets to come back to work as if he didn't take a life for no reason. I know the truth.
We investigate, we collect, we gather facts, and we are thorough. And if he broke the law, he's going to be accountable. And that's all there is to it. Right?
I can't believe my boyfriend.
It's a 10-year relationship?
Yes. I haven't been with anybody.
So if you
He
don't
didn't
mind
deserve this.
If you don't mind me asking, how your daughter's 4 or 5? So was there a break in the relationship?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you guys got back together?
Yeah, we got back together.
You guys planning to get married, right?
Yes, we was. Also having kids.
Okay.
Yes, we was.
Did he grow up in St. Paul?
Yes, he did.
So let me ask you some questions about his family. Do you know anything about his parents?
Yes, his mom is in his life. His sister is a doctor.
What's his mom's name?
Her name is Valerie Castile
What is she?
in Robbinsdale, Minnesota.
How old is she?
Probably like 50 or something. I don't know.
Does she work?
Yes,
Where is she?
I'm not sure.
And then the sister of the doctor, what's her name?
Alize Castile.
How do you spell that name?
I like the liquor Alize. And then,
I don't correct.
I mean either A-L-A-Z-Y, I don't know, but my boyfriend's dead.
Alize, and then the last name?
Castile.
Castillo. Okay, so she's not married. And she's a doctor where?
She does, I can't even think straight. I don't know, somewhere in Brooklyn Park. Oh my God.
In the meantime, can you refrain from talking to Deanna about...
It's okay, I'm right here with you. Mom, please stop saying cusses and screaming because I don't want you to get shooted.
Okay, give me a kiss. My phone just died, that's all.
I could keep you safe.
It's okay, I got it, okay? Come here. I can't believe they just did that. Damn. So no, I could take these bitches off?
No, please, no. I don't want you to get shooted.
Turn around and grab something real quick.
Mom, they not gonna shoot me, okay?
But you're scared.
I'm already in handcuffs.
Don't take them off. If you like, take them off and you
You know,
get everything
at
started.
694, you're gonna throw a 2.2 big boy thing.
I wish this town was safer. The other towns, we would live in it.
That's true.
I don't want it to be like this anymore.
Tell that to the police, okay? When they come, okay? Tell help them.
We're just gonna eat ice cream, have our dinner, have a great good time together. Now that he's gone, he might be gone forever.
Don't think like that. Don't talk like that.
No, because I'm serious. He might be gone forever. And if he be gone forever, I'm going to miss him very much.
I know. I'm gonna...
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord.